morning, good afternoon, good evening. Good to see you, gentlemen, and all that are climbing on board with us right now. It's good to see everybody. We're back. We're normal. We're going to talk all this technical crap today, so we're going to have a good time, though. We never get tired of talking about the technical, right? Maybe the death denial, maybe the death anxiety, but never the technical, man. We can talk for days about PETSFL lenses and iodides and iodates and fixers and, man, no problem. But you bring up death denial and it's like, I got a thing to go to. No. I'm glad you guys that joined us and enjoyed that. And Jeffrey, I appreciate your email. Thank you so much for that. Some of you are connected to it more so than others. And I hope everyone in the future will consider applying this to your artwork, or at least looking at it. I created a playlist of 5 videos. I know I got a couple of 100 videos on my channel. So I created a playlist. It's called Death Anxiety and Artists. And I put it in YouTube links there. So if you want to watch all 5 of them, it ends with Solomon, his show last week. Great. Wonderful. I enjoyed that last week. I don't know about you guys, but Solomon was Sheldon is such a great guy, and he's so open to having conversations, and he's so open to he immediately engaged on these ideas with not only art, of course, but photography, and specifically what Collodion. So he was very intrigued with what we do, let's say that. And we'll have him back at some point in time, I would imagine. If what I thought would be fun to do is have him come in here when people are sharing projects or surrounding those ideas and let him see those. Wouldn't that be neat? I think it would be. All right. Good afternoon, Quinn and gang. Hey, Will, good to see you, brother. And Linda from Sweden. Awesome, awesome. And April, welcome back, April. I'm glad you're joining us. Never get tired. Yeah, there you go, George. Never get tired. Good afternoon. Yeah. No, I'm being facetious. I never get tired of talking technical either. I just, let's see, I've been doing this stuff for about 2 weeks, and some of it gets like, water torture on the forehead sometimes. And some of the emails are it just seems like we go around and around. Some things are, monthly or semi, every 3 months. And some things are every half a year, and then some things are every year. These questions get dropped as new people come in. I can see the curves. It's kind of interesting to watch it, but same old questions, same old things. But we'll cover them. We'll go there. That's not a problem. Oh, good, Pablo. Good to see you, brother. You saw that on YouTube. I'm going to put that in the private chat. There's the list in the private chat as well, too, if you're in StreamYard here. With us and these 3 gentlemen is who we have right now. So let's do this. I hope everybody's well and doing great. I wanted to have you take a minute and see if we can go through. Let me pull this book up. If we can go through a little bit of this, I want to show you something unique about this. There's some developer things. This is Charles W. Gamble's book. And I'm just going to open it right on Google Books. So if you're looking at Google Books, go into Google Books, type Charles W. Gamble. Let me get. I'll put this up at the front of the page here, or we'll click back down there. I was just getting it prepared so we could see this, but boy. Okay, here we go. So there it is. An Introduction to the Practice of Wet Collodion Photography, Charles W. Gamble. This is published in 1895. Again, to reiterate a couple of things, I like to use, all my stuff comes from the primary literature, or the 19th and early 20th century literature on the process. I like to use a little later manuals, starting in, and not always, I like the Sunbeam and all that kind of stuff, that's 64. But I like things like after late 70s, 1880s, 1890s, and then up into the 10s and 20s and the 20th century Kodak's manual, things like that. But here's the reason why I like to look at a little older manual or newer manuals, new manuals. They've had time in the process. Things advanced technologically speaking, compounds, equipment. Over the decades, they slow, not like today, of course, but back in the day, you can see it as you read the manuals and the books, you can see how they progress and what they drop and what they keep and what they're having arguments about, like kind of like today, right? Human beings don't change. We still love to argue about, is it good to use copper sulfate? Well, it depends on who you ask, I guess, but no, it's not. Let's do this. I'm going to jump in. Let's see how I want to get it zoomed up so you guys can see this. And of course, you can read this on your own, no problem. But we're going to go down here to the contents. I'm going to show you where we're going to go today. I think you'll find it interesting. I think this book, well, you probably have never heard of it. Maybe you have. Maybe you've read it. Maybe you have a hard copy of it. But if you haven't, it's free on Google Books. Just go into browser, go to Google Books, type it out, like I said, and you'll pop up with this. You can download it too, PDF-wise. We're going to go into the chapter 4 here. The preparation of developer, intensifying solutions, fixing solutions, and varnish. So I'm just going to click on that, and we're going to come down here. I'm just going to kind of scroll through this a little bit. I want to point out some things that Gamble talks about here, specifically about development in the first, and then we'll look through some of his what he does in. And again, this is an introduction. This is really important. This is an introduction to the process. So we're not really talking about negatives or things like that. This is an introduction kind of thing. But check this out. This is chapter 4, preparation of developer intensifying solutions, fixing solutions, and varnish. So he goes, in the introductory chapter, it was mentioned that the exposed plate was developed by flowing over the film a solution of ferrous sulfate or iron protosulfate. He uses the old verbiage there because this is 1895, and acetic acid and water. What's the first thing you notice about that? Is there anything missing in his developer that we use today? Alcohol, a little bit of alcohol, right? So you'll notice if you read these and pick these little hints up about how these old boys manage their processes, you'll pick that up. So he's saying it's ferrous sulfate and acetic acid and water. No alcohol mentioned. Instead of using the above solution, the exposed film may be developed by using a solution of pyrogallic acid and acetic acid in water. Check that out. So right off the bat, we go from ferrous sulfate to pyrogallic acid or pyro. And listen to what he says here. The latter form of developing solution is not often adopted, meaning the pyro, for positives, right? The ferrous sulfate being better. In certain cases, however, it is used as when a plain iodized collodion containing no bromide is employed or used. Remember, we talked about iodized collodion? If you were being strictly technical and you said, this is a bottle of iodized collodion, in my mind, I would say, oh, that only has an iodide. There's no bromides in it, right? So there's iodized collodion and there's bromo iodized collodion. And I think in the contemporary world, the world we work in today in the process, we really need to be clear on the verbiage because, you know, tomato can mean very different things. It's just not how we talk about both chemically and equipment wise, but definitely chemical. So when we talk about iodized collodion, we're talking about a collodion that has only an iodide in it. When we talk about bromo iodized collodion, now we've added at least one iodide and at least one bromide, just to clear that up. So he says, plain iodized collodion containing no bromide is employed. It is found, however, that when pyrogallic acid is used as a developer, the films have to be exposed for a longer time in the camera than in the case of ferrous sulfate. Another interesting point, right? For the present, we shall adopt the iron developer. Okay, so he's like, this is one way you can do it. You can use pyrogallic acid. I've tried pyrogallic acid on positives, and not so much, I don't think, because it actually kind of stains it. But we have already mentioned that what is an effect of using the solutions of varying degree of concentration. So what he's going to talk about here, check this out. We're talking about using solutions in varying degree of concentration. That's what developer, iron ferrous sulfate. It will be seen then that the strength of the developer may be varied to suit the subject. When we desire to obtain strong contrast, a proportionally weaker developer would be used than if we desired to subdue or reduce the contrast. Is that counterintuitive to you guys? If you want more contrast, you use a weaker developer. It's kind of counterintuitive a little bit, right? So let's go on here. That's what he's saying. So if you want more contrast in your positives, vary that developer solution. Bring it down a notch or two, and you'll see you'll gain more contrast. In order to retard the reducing action of the ferrous sulfate, acetic acid, as before mentioned, is added to the solution. Many acids also act in this way. He's talking about a restrainer, right? Restrainer is what we call the acid. They retard the reduction of silver nitrate. For example, nitric and sulfuric acid, citric acid, and many other organic acids. These acids vary in their restraining effect and in the character of the deposit, which is really important to know, right? It is desirable that the deposit be as fine as possible. So when we start talking about these sub-iodates and how this double decomposition process works, we can get really scientific, we can really get down in the weeds with it. But basically what he's saying is the strength of the developer, what type of restrainer you use is going to, and that's what it is, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about reducing the silver iodide and silver bromide, if you have a bromoiodized collodion, those two salts, we're talking about reducing them to the state of pure metallic silver. And he's talking about the size or the fineness of the silver that's laid down and exposed and then ultimately developed, the quality of the image. So he's talking about the strength of the solution. Are you using a 3% ferrous sulfate developer? Are you using a 1.5%? What kind of contrast do you want to gain or lose? And what kind of restrainer or acid are you using? There's chemical and organic restrainers. I happen to use a glacial acetic acid, which is the strongest you can get. An acetic acid is around 30%. Pickling vinegar is about 10%, and your vinegar under your kitchen sink's about 3 to 5%, something like that, if I remember right. I'm not sure. But those types of variants, just in developer and restrainer alone, this is what people miss. I see these images posted all the time on social media. Flat, lackluster, overdeveloped, underexposed, overdeveloped, blah, 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 constantly. So you can fine tune this even after you get your settings right? You're working in, oh, that looks good. What if you want to tweak that a little bit? What if you want a little less contrast? Lately, I've been seeing a lot of plates, relatively speaking, that are super contrasty, right? Boom, black and white. So you might want to look at, if you're having contrast issues, and 90% of the time it's going to be on contrast issues lacking contrast, rather flat images. Look at those two things. What percentage of developer are you using? Is it a 3%, 2%, 1%? And what type of restrainer are you using and how much? And I've talked about this quite a bit in the past, but we've really got to be careful about how much alcohol we add to the developer as well, too, because that can cause some other problems. And one of the model marks, lackluster, those kinds of things, alcohol can really cause some density problems too, if you will. It gets in the way. There's a limit there. Alcohol's in the developers for flow, so it covers your plate, doesn't start and stop and create those sweeps. But there's a limit there on how much and your conditions, where alcohol will interfere. If you don't have to use much alcohol, don't use it. If you have a new silver bath, don't use alcohol at all in your developer for a while. Let's go back to the document here. It's desirable that the deposit be fine as possible. And what he's talking about there is the structure of the silver, metallic silver on the plate after it's reduced. And for this reason, on the account of its gentle restraining action, acetic acid is generally adopted. So you can see, and one of my points here today is talk about we can vary the develop. This stuff is not written in stone, right? You must do this. You must have this much. You must have the latitude and developer is so crazy. you might not get the exact results you want, but the latitude is incredible, crazy, wide. You can put 20 grams of iron ferrous sulfate and get a 2% solution. You can do 30 grams, get a 3% solution, 40 grams, a 4% solution. We're talking about the iron and the acid. The amount of iron you use is going to be proportionate to the amount of acid you use. So keep those things in mind. And one of the big reasons I want to point this out is by 1895, we were pretty set making direct positive images with ferrous sulfate, no alcohol, and a glacial acetic acid was the choice, a premium choice then. You don't see anything about copper sulfate. You don't see anything about saltpeter, sodium nitrate. You don't see anything about even alcohol here. So keep these things in mind as you go through the process. Experiment a little bit with your developer. You're going to have to anyway. In this, if you live in an environment, unless you're in the equator, you're going to live in an environment where the seasons change, temperatures, humidity. So you're going to mess with that anyway. But keep this in mind. And Gamble's book is awesome. I mean, it's better language. It's a little easier to understand for people. So it's good. It's good. Restraining action acetic acid is generally adopted. That's pretty much what we're talking about here. Page 30, excuse me. Gelatin and glycerin. Gelatin, glycerin, and sugar retard the precipitation of metallic silver by making the solution more viscous. And these bodies are often present in the developer. Let me just mention this. He's talking about gelatin, glycerin, and sugar as organic restrainers. And how an organic restrainer works is it's almost like space. Like if you're in an elevator and the elevator's packed, that last person can't get through the door. It's already packed up. He uses a little different verbiage. He uses the solution is more viscous. But really what we're talking about, it crowds it out and it doesn't let the action of the iron hit the silver as hard or as long. So that's what a restrainer is. You're trying to hold back. What is a restrainer? I should have started with that. What is a restrainer? A restrainer is a solution, an acid, generally speaking, or some form of acid that holds back, retards, restrains, holds back the development. When you pour it on the plate, you have specific areas on that plate where the light has hit that plate. Those are the areas you want to have the developer work on, and then the gradation down to the black or clear plate or clear glass or whatever it is. What you don't want to happen, that I see all the time, is the unexposed silver developing. So if you didn't have any restrainer at all, any acid or any restrainer in your developer, and you poured it on your plate, it'd just flash up and go dark because there's nothing holding that. It's going to develop all the silver, not just the highlights where the light is struck and the midtones and then fade off into the void or shadow areas. It's going to develop the whole thing. So the idea behind these restrainers is to hold back the development and allow you to visually observe what's going on in that plate. So your highlights come up 3 to 4 seconds, your midtones in 7 or 8 seconds, around the 12, 13 second mark in a perfect world, temperature, humidity, and all that, your shadows start to form. And that's when you pour the water on and you arrest the development. But as you notice, as you pour that water on, the plate is still greasy. That still has development going on. So if you were to be technical about it, my advice on developing plates is about 20 to 25 seconds total. And that's pouring water on it around 15 seconds. That's how long it keeps developing for another 4, 5, 8 seconds after you pour the water on. It's still working that developer. So you've got to manage these things. You've got to understand how the process works, learn how the process works and how the chemicals work, and then manage it. So he says makes it more viscous, and these bodies are often present in the developer. The reducing power of the developer also varies with its temperature. The higher the temperature, the more quickly the reduction takes place. Talked about temperature all the time. On the molecular level, down where we can't see anything with our naked eye, you heat that up, that just goes crazy. You cool it off, it slows down, right? Physics, basic physics, right? Just like everything. We have got to keep all of these components and variables in mind if we're going for that ultimate exposure, development, and ultimately the ultimate play, whether it's positive or negative, in either way. Hey, there's Bernd. Okay, George, let's see. George says, so you add your restrainer to the developer. Yes, sir. The iron sulfate, this is how I break it down. Distilled water is your carrier. These are words that I use rather than saying distilled water, the carrier. The iron ferrosulfate is your reducer. The acid or restrainer, your acid, either chemical or organic, is your restrainer. And alcohol, if you need it, is for flow, to cover your plate without starting and stopping. Once your bath gets filled up with solvents, you're going to have to put a little alcohol in your developer because you'll start getting those sweeps. It'll fight going over that plate. It's in competition now with the silver nitrate with the solvents in it. So you need a little, that alcohol breaks, that solvent breaks it down. So it greases the highway so your developer can flow over the plate and not start and stop. But yes, George, you add your restrainer to the developer. And whatever strainer you use, that's great. Whatever, there is no hard and fast rules on these things, ladies and gentlemen. This is your environment, the way you work, what you want to produce in an image, all those things. This is not one size fits all by any means, but there is a parameter that you need to work within wherever you're at on that scale. You need to make sure you understand why you're there and what you're using it for. And it's a lot of latitude there, guys, a lot of latitude. Don, good to see you, brother. Don Rutledge Day says, the first developer I made in-house was the Jody Ake vinegar recipe. Well, the Jody Ake vinegar recipe is you read the old literature. There's tons of types of, and that's fine, but there's tons of types of organic restrainers you can use. Actually, vinegar is not really organic. It would be, a molasses, a beer, a honey, those types of organic sugar, those types of organic restrainers. He's talking about a vinegar recipe that also uses sugar, I believe. Don, chime in on that. I believe, I don't know, I'm not familiar with Jody Ake vinegar recipe, whatever the name. I'm not familiar with all these recipes. I mean, people post stuff all the time. Tell us if that has sugar in it. The problem, and what his question is it cheap and easy and seems to be reliable? Any shortcomings to watch? Yes. Yes, there is sugar in it. One of the problems is because organic restrainers work a little differently, you need to beef those up a little bit. Okay. So you have the sugar in there and you have the household vinegar in there. You have the iron in there. And Don's right. It's cheap and it works great in certain situations. Don, the minute you leave, I believe you're in Texas, if I remember correctly. The minute you leave Texas and come up to Colorado, come up into the high elevation mountains here, your developer, maybe your Collodion, all kinds of things, the variables will change, right? So yes, that is an inexpensive, good developer. If it works in your area, it'll work fine, right? What are the drawbacks? Changing geography or changing where, the weather, the temperatures, those kinds of things. Sometimes this doesn't have quite the punch. If you're in a warmer environment or you've got to add a lot of extra sugar and vinegar to it. Here's my theory. Less is more. The lesser amount I can use of anything, the better result I'm going to get. Then I'm going to find the fastest, quickest, and cleanest way to get there. That's why I use glacial acetic acid, the strongest acid you can get, which is a chemical restrainer. I use KCN for fix, which is the most aggressive and most dangerous, if you will, poison-wise, potassium cyanide for fix. Quickest, fastest way to get there, right? No real shortcomings. Yeah, he's in Texas. There you go. So if your developer's working in Texas down there nicely, keep on it. You may want to, Don. And here's another thing. A lot of times people don't have anything to compare with. They say, oh, that looks like a good plate. That looks fine. Then they switch up a little something, and it's like, oh, my goodness, look at this. Changes radically. And you can't describe these differences in a video conference or a phone call. These things have to be experienced in your environment, the way you work, and the images you make. If it's performing for you, keep using it. That's the point. Bernd in Deutschland just got rid of crazy fog by putting about 50% more distilled water to positive developer. More acid didn't help. Interesting. Good point, Bernd. Here's the other way you can do it, right? So what he's saying is he added acid, didn't do anything. I'm not sure why. That sounds curious to me, but maybe he'll elaborate. But the way he got around it was you have 1 liter of developer, you take half of that and cut it with 50% distilled water. You're basically making it half as strong. What's going to happen, Bernd? What's going to happen? Was ist los? What happened there? What's happening? Your development is longer, correct? Did your development increase by adding more distilled water? Or was your developer so crazy hot that it's going to develop everything on the plate, like you said? Maybe you started out strong and hot and you ended up cutting back. You can do it either way. The problem, the reason I tell people you can cut your developer with water, definitely. But the reason I encourage people to do it with a chemical restrainer, I prefer glacial acetic acid, or an organic restrainer like Don's using. The reason I tell them to do that is because usually the development time will stay within that 15 seconds. You don't diminish the strength of the developer. You just add more retardant, restrainer to it, and that resolves the problem. But I'd like to hear, Bernd, why your acid didn't work. And he said it was fresh collodion. So, people write me all the time, and I just can't tell, their environments and their things and, what they're mixing and their chemicals and compounds. People send me images. What happened? I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't tell you. I wish I could. And then you have to kind of go down through and dig out what they're doing. So anyway, let's see if Bernd responds back to that. So let's go back to here. So he's talking about a restrainer. For this reason, more acetic acid or other restrainer is used in warm weather or in the warmth rather than cold weather. Alcohol is added to the developer to enable the solution to flow readily over the film. Notice he's calling this film. Somebody, I don't know, a while ago tried to call me out on calling collodion film. Okay, technically it's not a film. I get it. But, for communication purposes, we can call it film. It's okay. We're not breaking any rules. The collodion gods are not going to come down and slice our throats. We will be fine. It's interesting that Chuck Gamble calls it film, which is fine for me. They didn't get on me. I was calling emulsion. I was calling it emulsion. But the only emulsion is pop emulsion, gelatin emulsion. So, and people call me out for being technically, you're not saying that's not right, But this is a good example of using the word film. So it flows readily over the film. With a new bath, there it is. With a new bath, this is not required. Make a note of that. A new bath, you do not need alcohol in your developer. None. Okay? That'll save you a little heartache, give you a little density, manage some of the problems that you might have along that way. When, however, the bath solution has been used for sensitizing a number of plates, it becomes charged with its solvents from the collodion. Remember I just said that? And when we come to develop the film of solution upon the plate will repel a plain aqueous developer, and there will be a difficulty in flowing the solution, which may cause uneven development. The amount of alcohol, it will be seen, will vary with the state of the bath, and in most formulas, the amount is expressed as QS, or quantity sufficient, as much as suffices, from 10 to 20 minims of alcohol per ounce, fluid ounce, of developer will generally be sufficient. Methylated alcohol must not be used. That is a frequent cause of stains and fogs. So one of the things I wanted to bring up here, as I read through this old literature in all my spare time, I I pick up these little tidbits and I try to connect them what's going on, what I see on social media or my email. And there's been a lot of talk lately about alcohol in Collodion primarily. But a lot of times people use the same alcohol they make their Collodion with as their developer. And I've emphasized this methylated alcohol. If you guys know what methylated alcohol is, it's wood alcohol. Very poisonous, smells terrible, and branches the more contemporary kind of branching off of that is methyl ethyl ketone, MEKs, things like that in denatured alcohol. But he says, do not use wood alcohol in developer. What does he say? Stains and fog, both, right? So people say, what happened here? And he's got a mark on the forehead and mottle marks all through, and it's a little bit flat and foggy. It could be, hey, I used a cheap biofuel that's got, it's methylated, it's methanol. It's not ethanol, it's wood alcohol. Keep that in mind. The student will be asked first to start practical work by copying a black and white drawing. A developer for the purpose will now be given the formula which is well. Wow, can you imagine that? What if I had a workshop? The students came in. What are we going to photograph? You are going to photograph a line copy. This is what you're going to photograph. You're going to photograph. This is so funny. You're going to photograph these. You're going to photograph these drawings for my building. What? Yeah. This is what this guy is having them do, right? In his book. Maybe it's best. Usually you start out, you have some kind of still life you can work with and get it down. But that's really what all he's talking about there. But look at the formula. The gelatin, a sheet of gelatin, 15 grains, acidic acid, pure, 120 minims, and distilled water. And then this is number one. And number two that you add to it or with it is the ferrous sulfate and the distilled water. The gelatin is soaked in water for 10 minutes and the mixture warmed by placing the vessel containing the same in hot water. When the solution is complete, add the acidic acid and filter while hot. And this is a formula due to the late Jacob Hughes in the Photographic News of 1865. So he's in 95 and he jumps back, 30 years to give an introductory developer solution. So this gets into we won't go over much of this, but what he's talking about is he wants you to get the idea how to make clean, clear plates. That's why he says photograph a line drawing on paper. These are good exercises. They're just super boring for people that are, want to do the process and want to take a plate home of a portrait of themselves or something, right? So he's just talking about how to work through that. I wanted to jump down here to the intensifiers here. So that's what he's talking about, line work, subjects. You can read that. You can read that if you're interested. But let me jump down here to intensification or intensifiers. The term is applied to any chemical process by which we increase the opacity to actinic light of the deposit produced by the first development. So translate that into English. Anything you do after that first development is intensification or intensifying. Sometimes we call it redeveloping, but that's usually reserved for negatives. Redevelopment with pyrogallic acid is usually reserved for negatives. So here he goes. We may increase the amount of the deposit density by precipitating more silver on that already present. The term redevelopment is sometimes applied to this, and thus increase the opacity. Or we may do so by other means by treating the image with a solution of cupric bromide, afterwards followed by a solution of silver nitrate when considerable increase in opacity is produced. Basically, what he's telling you here is if you really need to jump that up, you could bleach that with a bromide and then hit it with silver nitrate. I'm telling you, there are so many varied recipes just on the basics here. What you guys would see today, if you pick up this book, this is the most basic book you could get, right? This is an introduction to the process. So if he's crawling down in the weeds like this, you can see how far we've dumbed it down today. And the reason for that, I think, and I'll get a little philosophical here, the reason for that is that we have the web, we have TV, we have phones, We just don't spend time reading and learning and practicing like they did. We just don't. There's a lot of people. I ask, you read it. I haven't read a book in years. What? I don't have time to read. Will you read this article? God, that's like 12 paragraphs. I can read the first one and then click it off, right? Too long to read kind of thing. We're living in that environment. So when you look at a book like this and you start getting in the weeds about a basic developer and you're scratching your head saying, what's this guy talking about? That tells you the chasm, the separation of our thinking today being consumed, our time being sucked up by all these devices and distractions. I don't want to get into the death denial thing again, but all these distractions are taking us away from really learning this. So we want the easiest way out. We want the quickest solution. We want the cheapest solution. And unfortunately, that doesn't work for this process. If you really want to learn it, if you just want to come in, make a splash and get your 15 minutes of fame and get your article in your local paper and have the news crew come out and say, there's only 200 people working in this process today and I'm one of them, right? If you want to do that, you can do that. But if you really want to learn it and you want to take that information and those tools to inform and support your work, this is the stuff you got to jump into. This is the stuff you got to learn and read, even beyond my book, for sure. I've tried to take this stuff and simplify it the best I can. I know it's not perfect. I know, I'm human, I'm fallible, all that stuff. But I just wanted to help people not to have to wade through all of the 19th century English verbiage, try to translate all the minins and drachmas and all the weights and measurements, and try to communicate in the most basic form the basics of the process. But my point is, the basics of the process in 1895 were much more sophisticated than what we're talking about today. That's all my point is. So let's go through here. I'm sorry. I think Linda said something here, or call it emulsion. Yeah, there you go. I call it call it what you want. We know what you're talking about, right? We're talking about the layer collodion with a silver on it, sensitized. I'd call that film or emulsion, sure. I know it isn't in that case, but we'll call it that. A change in color may also be brought about, the deposit rendered more non-actinic. What does non-actinic mean? What does actinic mean? Does anybody know what actinic means? Usually, I got to look at these things here. Sorry, Boguslaw, I didn't see that. To stop, bath, tap water is enough. No, yes, tap water is enough, Boguslaw. That's right. That's a good question. Boguslaw is asking, when you go to, after you develop and you go to arrest the development, you're pouring water on or you have a tap, he's asking, is distilled water, I mean, in a perfect world, yes. I mean, if you could do it, but tap water should be fine. If you have really hard, mineral heavy deposited water, I may reconsider that. But usually I haven't seen any tap water that really hurts or does any damage to developed plate, just arresting the development. Because all you're really doing is washing away those active components, right? But that's a great question. And Pablo says, what makes a silver bath to be new or old? Just time and plate's gone through it? Or, yes, Pablo, when we talk about a new bath and an old bath, what we're really talking about is a new bath is one that's not been used at all or only had 4, 5, 10 plates through it, maybe, depending on the size of the bath and the plate. I don't want to qualify it so strictly because I'm just giving you an example. An old bath is a bath that you've worked hard. You've done some light maintenance on, maybe you've sunned it a few times. That's an old bath. They are going to be solvent rich. If you do a lot of aeration and a lot of sunning, and you get those solvents out, if you use a big container to let those solvents evaporate off, you could bring the bath almost back to a new state where you don't have to have very little alcohol in your developer or none at all. Experiment with this, ladies and gentlemen. Experiment with it. Try it and see. Take good notes. Say this bath has had this many plates ran through it, this size, and see where you can start fudging with your developer. This will improve your images, the quality of your images. Like, man, once you start dialing in and you fine tune, this will really give you control, give you better quality images, And it even translates over into making negatives for sure, because it's basically the same principle, right? So yeah. And Jeffrey says new silver bath, replenish bath too. Yeah, exactly, Jeffrey, exactly. Just like I said, if you aerate a nut, what? God, I hate bringing this up again, but I have to. Why people love to heat up or boil their silver bath. And again, let me make it perfectly clear for the attorneys out there and the litigious people. I do not endorse people putting their silver bath on heat sources, period. I just do not. Silver fulminate is a real thing. You shouldn't do that. I understand, however, why they want to, because it is a perfect method for getting rid of those solvents. You can bring your bath back to new quite quickly. And if you live in an area with not a lot of sun and those kinds of things, I understand that. But the problem is Google silver fulminate, and that's why I don't recommend it. And plus, I publish literature on this process, and I don't want to be called into court as an expert on the process after somebody's blowing themselves up or done something stupid. So use the sun. The real catch is don't try to aerate your silver bath in a little, 4 centimeter, jug and think that's going to, you need a great big wide cookie jar and let that stuff evaporate off wide open, let the sun hit it, let it, where I live, I get it, but I can get my silver baths clean in a day up here, right? I mean, just UV, air, and boom, the solvents are gone. So keep that in mind as you go through challenges, both with your silver bath and your developer. Most of the time, people have problems not with their developer, but with their silver bath. And your it's a chain reaction all the way down, right? So if this is bad, everything below it's not going to be great, even if those components are right. So first things first in that order. Pablo says, all times I did setting in such silver bath seems to go back to new stage. Yes, good. Yep, consistent with the new bath. No, you're not, brother. Amigo, you got it. That's exactly right. You're boiling off. Listen to me. Back it up, edit that out. You're evaporating off the solvents with air and sun. Air and heat. The heat from the sun will also create that action as well, too. You're just not bringing it up to 80 degrees Celsius and potentially forming those fulminates, right? It's safe. It's good. Way to go, Pablo. That's the thing. And Jerry says, I boil mine by leaving out in the case studs for a month sometimes. I've been there, brother. I lived in Germany for 5 years. I've been there. I get you. That's why I've accumulated about 6 or 7 silver baths, because I've, sometimes if, overseas, it took a long time to get those solvents out. And I wasn't about to put it on heat. Just not a big believer. I'll risk management. I'll take some risk, not others. So silver intensification. In this method, we apply the film to the solution of some reducing agent, ferrous sulfate, with free nitrate, silver nitrate. The silver salt in the solution is decomposed and the silver is precipitated in the metallic state. So rather than saying the silver iodide or the iodide, whatever you put in, potassium iodide, ammonium iodide, whatever it is, and the bromide, rather than saying it goes through a process of double decomposition, changing those salts to halogens, he talks about it as decomposed and the silver is precipitated in the metallic state. So this is more on the developer side, right? So we're talking about, he goes on, the metal being attracted to that, already forming the image. The process is really a continuation of development, hence the term used, redevelopment. Although the expression is used in another sense, in photo process, it fairly accurately describes what is meant. So he clarifies right there. He knows that when we talk about redevelopment, the verbiage, the word, we're usually talking about redeveloping negatives. And that's what he's talking about there. It's used in other another sense in photo process. It's fairly accurately expressed in what is meant. The more silver we precipitate in the image, the greater will be the density. and consequently the opacity to light, meaning the more it blocks light, the thicker the silver gets. The reducing agent, most preferred, is a solution of pyrogallic acid, which is acidified with citric acid, the acid being the purpose, as mentioned before, of the restraining action. So there he gives, which is fairly typical as a negative redeveloper. Try some of these experiments. You might be very surprised at the results you get, rather than staying with the tried and true kind of generic developer. You have latitude. Make it work. Try some redevelopment. Try some of these ideas that he's talking about here. This solution should be kept in a stoppered bottle. Only a small quantity is required. You guys know, I have actually this recipe in my book on redeveloping negatives. It may be, well, it's stronger. Yeah, it's a lot stronger than that. But this is a very, very weak solution. Look at that. The pyrogallic acid is 50 grains. Anybody remember what the grains are? Grains to grams. So if we look at 50 grains in there into 10 fluid ounces, which is almost 300 milliliters of water, that's a little over 3 grams of pyrogallic acid in, it's less than a quarter of what we use for negatives. So this may be very, very effective for what you're after. You'll have to, if you want to, you'd have to try it to see. Yeah, here we go. With regard to other intensification methods, we have a number to choose from. The various methods: cells, uranium, eder and Tulse lead, copper bromide, and silver nitrate can be and are used according to the circumstances. So there, like he said, there's a whole bunch of recipes to work from to do this. And one more thing I want to show you in this. We come down to the last name method is admirable when its considerable increase in opacity is required. Meaning that if you really want to pump that density up on your positive plate, this is the recipe to use. And look at that. Copper, sulfate, and potassium bromide. And guess what you use to bleach your plate? Copper sulfate and ammonium bromide, or potassium bromide, whichever one you want to use. So this is basic negative intensification on a positive, which is really interesting to see, but it is what it is. You can try that and see if your results are very good or not good at all. Varnish. For preparing the varnish, we require a good sample. Look at what he uses: orange shellac, methylated spirit, good turpentine, a small piece of pumice, a clean dry pint bottle, the sound cork, and the shellac and methylated spirits together. And I don't know, I didn't see here what is he missing in here? Anybody want to chime in? What is he missing there on his varnish? As I look through that, he doesn't have a plasticizer in there. He has no lavender oil. He has nothing to keep the varnish flexible, right? That's why we put a plasticizer in it. Dale said, you made the comment earlier that people don't read. Why should we? It's much easier to ask. Yes, it is, yeah, Dale. And you know what else is a lot easier? To get the terrible wrong answer and sometimes dangerous answers from that. So consider the source. That's very good, though. You're right. Daniel Perez says, after sending, do you need to iodize? That's a great question. I was wondering if that was going to come up. Once you, and let's first say, what is he talking about here? When you first make a silver bath, the first thing you need to do is you need to excite that bath. What does excite that bath mean? It means that you fill it with iodides. That bath has to be full of iodides, because the first plate you stick in there, if the bath isn't full of iodides, it's going to steal the iodides off the plate. And guess what your plate's going to look like after you develop it? Flat, white, blowing out. There's no iodides. There's nothing there. The bath stole them from the plate. So you need to iodize the bath with either pouring a glass plate with some old red collodion or even new collodion. It doesn't matter. Old red is better. It's just loaded with iodides. Put it in the bath for a few hours or overnight. Once you do that with the bath, you are finished. That will never, ever not, that will always be full or relatively full of iodides, and the first couple of plates you put in there is going to replenish it anyway. But no, the quick answer, the short answer is no. That's a kind of a permanent thing. Once you do that one time, you're good to go. So it's a really good question, though. Yep, Dale got it. Oil. He does not have, we call it a plasticizer. He does not have a plasticizer in this varnish, which should be a lavender oil. We use Canada balsam, a tree sap in ferrotite batter, things like that. Things to keep whatever binder you're using flexible. In this case, collodion. Tin types is the asphaltum, whatever the binder is. Stand up for Judas. There you go. In old lit, I've noticed collodion recipes with potassium and ammonium in one. I do not combine iodides, but it's possible to use one silver bath for two different collodions. Yes, that's actually a really good question, to be honest with you. In the old literature, these double, sometimes you'll see triple, quadruple salts in recipes. What they were trying to achieve there, they were trying to round out the image fully, whether they were in foliage for the bromides, landscapes and greens and some of the yellows, or they were trying to add a potassium and ammonium iodide together and try to get the contrast but not lose the shelf life. So the answer to your question is makes no difference. The silver bath does not care what iodide or bromide you use. It's going to perform the double decomposition, convert those over, change them to halides, silver iodide, silver bromide, regardless of the original prefix, ammonium, cadmium, potassium, whatever it is. That's a good question, though. Good question. So back to Gamble. We're going to go back up here. I wanted to show you one more thing, if I can. This is a great book. It's free. There's no reason why you wouldn't get it, and I hope there's no reason why you wouldn't read it. Where was it? Direct positives on glass, ferrotypes. Oh, let's. I just want to look at this for just a second. So he's right off the bat. He doesn't say amylotypes and ferrotypes. He says direct positives on glass, ferrotypes. You can read through this, but what I wanted to point out to you, and this is the verbiage I use all the time. There are no positives in this type of photography. There are only negatives. So we get confused when we talk about these things, and I just want to point this out here, and he talks about it well here. A so-called collodion positive, so-called, I love that. So-called collodion positive is merely a thin negative picture, which, when viewed by reflected light against a dark background, appears as a positive. That's all we're talking about here. And so when I ramble on about pHs in silver bath and how much silver you're laying down, positives, you just want the minimal amount you can get. You want the thinnest image with the information, well, exposed well and all that, but you don't want a big, heavy layer of silver, and you don't want all of this stuff that goes along with what you're trying to do with negatives. Negatives, you're transmitting light through onto a piece of paper. Positives, we're putting thin, reflected light, just like you said, against something dark. A thin negative produces a positive. And you'll find the best positives are the ones you hold up to transmitted light, and you can barely see any information on there, and then you put it against something black, and this whole story emerges like, wow, where did all that come from? That's a good positive. And that's all. I just wanted to point out that these variants are two different animals, but in the same, in the same species, if you will. Here we have the densest part of the image corresponding to the highlights of the subject, reflecting the most light, and so they are the brightest part of the picture. In the halftones, there's less light reflected, and so they appear darker, the shadows being supplied by the black background. In order to get the best possible effect, it's necessary that the exposure is not prolonged. Man, if I complain about anything, it's overexposed positives. My God, guys, dial that exposure back. There's not enough time in the day to respond to all of those that I see or that are emailed to me. So he says, exposure is not too prolonged, that development is not unduly continued. I just say cut the exposure and do 15 seconds, right? That's all you need to do. You don't need this long exposure, unduly long. Once you start getting into, I pour my developer on, I'm waiting, and oh, there's something there at 10 seconds, and then you're already up to 20 seconds, and you don't even have your midtones are barely coming in. That tells you you're way underexposed. And all you're doing is developing that unexposed silver, flattening everything out, plugging up all the shadow areas or the void areas. It just is not a good scene. In order to get the best possible effects, it's necessary that the exposure is not too prolonged, development is not unduly continued, and that the silver is deposited as a white form as possible. That is not easy for me to say. Collodion positives may be made either upon glass or upon the sheets of metal japanned, either black or brown, known as ferrotite plates. In the first case, the black coating has to be supplied. In the second, is given by the support itself. What do you read there? In the first, the glass, the black support, the black needs to be applied. What do you think he's talking about there? I think I know. I think he's talking about asphaltum. Asphaltum. Very common. Very, very, very common. Probably the best blacks you can get. Why is that? Because the asphaltum, the ferrotite battery, is the exact same thing as putting asphalt. So you're making images on metal plates using that black sheeny material to reflect, putting it on the glass, on the back side of the glass, or varnish the image and put it on the collodion side, either way you want. I know we won't get into all the controversy there, but we know it's pretty good. We know it is. Collodion positives, in the first case, the support itself. So the second is the ferrotypes of, obviously, they're baked and have the asphaltum on them. Positives upon the metal plates or ferrotypes, as they are generally called, are reversed as regard to right to left, laterally reversed. That's what we call it, right? Unless a mirror or prism is used. That is so weird to me. I don't think I'd ever do that. When this reversion is objectable, then the positive may be made upon glass support. Here we may show the picture reversed or not according to whether we view it looking at the image with the film side facing us or looking at the image through the glass. So what he's saying, I don't know if you guys knew this, but back in the day, like if I was wearing this shirt here, let me see here. If I was wearing this shirt here, all of this stuff would be backwards. So that would be definitely something that people would not enjoy looking at, reverse text or reversed images. They didn't even want themselves reversed. They didn't wear. I haven't seen any New York Mets t-shirts from 1890, but they did not like that it was laterally reversed. And his point here is put it on glass and turn it around. We do that a lot, right? We do. A lot of folks do it with Photoshop now, but we do that. We do that a lot. A collodion is used, especially iodized, for positive work, one which gives a thin, delicate image being required. The bath is the same as given, taking the first use of glass as a support. The cleaning operations are the same as before, and the glass is preferably given a substratum. With ferrotite plates, these are cleaned with the following manner. They are first gently rubbed with the japan surface with a piece of soft linen, then dipped in the following solution. So he goes on to talk about cleaning glass and cleaning the ferrotypes. But I wanted to show you, wanted to give you some idea on how these early books, even in the intro stuff, how they probably seem pretty complex to a lot of folks listening or watching this, but how involved they were and the difference and then some of the developer stuff. Pablo says, speaking of asphaltum, is there a way to get glass plates back painted before going into the silver bath without messing it up? Wow, that's a great question. I have been asked this before about different material. We know silver baths, the silver nitrate is super corrosive. So most material you cannot put in there, right? It just corrosive, oxidizes it terribly. One thing, and I've tried this before, I only tried it once. I did, and it worked, quote unquote. I took a 4x5 piece of glass. I covered it with asphaltum, both sides. I dipped it. I dipped the glass in ferrotite batter. Let it drain. I had to reverse it because it got thinner at the top, but you have to kind of rotate it, kind of like paper. And I put it out in the sun. I put it out in the sun for a couple of days. I did not bake it, but I put it out in the sun. I flowed collodion on it, put it in the bath, I don't know, 2.5, 3 minutes, whatever it was, and made an image on it. It was like a glass ferrotite. And it worked great. It was perfect. But then I got thinking, if it didn't do anything to my bath, it didn't change anything. There was one, 4x5 plate. But if you keep this in mind and you think about glass is inert to the silver bath. We know glass does not hurt the silver bath. And we know the ferrotite batter, asphaltum, does not hurt the silver bath because you can put it on metal plates and bake it and good to go. The only concern I had, I didn't bake the glass and I didn't want anything off-gassing or bleeding out into my silver bath out of the asphaltum. And as far as I know, it was only one tiny plate one time and it didn't do anything. But I bet if you were to take and dip glass into asphaltum and set it out in the sun for a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, whatever you feel good, let that not only dry but cure, get the solvents out of it and all that stuff. That's all I was trying to do. I bet you for 2 or 3 minutes in your silver bath, you could run plate after plate after plate. It'd be interesting to try it. And that's a great idea because you are not going to get a better backing surface for positives other than maybe black glass. You're not going to get a better surface than asphaltum. It's shiny, it's black, it's sheeny. It gives everything back right to you. The finest silver details, everything. Produces a beautiful color. When I first published about doing asphaltum on plates, I got a lot of grief, right? A lot of grief, a lot of feedback. Oh, you can't do that. That will peel off. All this stuff, telling me how blasphemous it was to do that. And I've ran enough tests to know bogus. I have plates here that I've asphaltum on the collodion side that are 15 years old. And they're perfectly fine. There's nothing there. Will it start peeling off in 100 years? I don't care. Who cares? Really? I mean, if your ego, we're going back to death denial here. If your ego is that big and, I can't use asphaltum on that thing might peel in 200 years. I don't think anybody cares. So, but if you're concerned with that, if you're truly concerned with that, there are measures you can take, i.e., glass image, varnish the image side. Excuse me. Varnish the image side. Damn, I'm choking. Varnish the image side and asphaltum the glass side. The problem is you're not going to get the laterally reversed. You're not going to have the image appropriate for direct on, right? It's going to be laterally reversed. You're going to look through it from the varnish side, or varnish your glass image and let it dry and cure. There's difference. Drying is a day, curing is 3 or 4 days, depending on where you're at. You want all that stuff out of that varnish, alcohol and water. Varnish the emulsion side, let it dry and cure, and asphaltum the emulsion side. Do a couple of tests, see what you like, see if it works. I know I like it, but that's just me. Pablo says the best place I've ever done it on glass and asphaltum. I agree. If you're going to talk about yes, I agree. Black glass will come in a very tight second, or some people might even say they're comparable, which they probably are. The problem with black glass normally is you have ridges and ripples and it's pits and things. It's made kind of imperfectly. And a lot of folks don't like those, artifacts, the actual plate being dipped, wrinkled and dipped and all that stuff. So clear, plain glass with asphaltum on it, it's like perfect. Pablo says the problem is that I always get spills on the image surface, so I must clean with spirit, not something I'd recommend. Can't find black glass here. Yeah, Pablo, continue on. In fact, I'd say try the experiment. If you can get good gilsonite in a good turpentine, a good solvent, methylated spirit, make a good batch. I'd probably even recommend trying to get a little plasticizer in there if you can, something to just keep the Actually, depending if you use manufactured asphaltum, here in America, I get it from Angel Gilding. They already have a plasticizer in it, right? I can just dilute it down, put it on, and they've never cracked. Now, I have had large 40 by 50 centimeter plates. I asphalt them, and it gets hairline cracks. That means I diluted my stuff down too thin, and it cracked. So you have to play with the amount and variation. The color will vary with the amount of turpentine or solvent that you use as well. This is all experimental, so you have to go through it, experiment, see what works for you. Yeah, and you don't, Pablo, you don't need black glass. You can kind of make your own, and it's legitimate, and actually it's cheaper. Black glass is very expensive, mucho dinero. Hank says, let's see, we got some comments here. Chopper says, have you noticed if original wood sensitizing tanks were lined and sealed with asphalt? Yeah, Chopper, that's actually called gutta percha. It's the tanks themselves, and yes, sometimes they were lined and sealed. Asphaltum, yeah, definitely. I know for a fact, and they did that, for light leaks and things like that, right? But I know for a fact that the gutta percha is a lot like it's like a ceramic, right? It's like a ceramic, and that's what they made their tanks out of. And they could seal them up with asphalt. Asphaltum's great, man. Asphaltum's great all the way around. Hey, Hank, how you doing, brother? Hank says, black spray paint on the image side of the ambrotype. Don't do it. Good advice. That's where I would draw the line. That's why I say, look, if you're not going to get asphaltum, gilsonite, and make the proper solution, and you go down and you get some Krylon spray paint, I guarantee you, not only in your lifetime, but in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see that doesn't work. You're absolutely right, Hank. That was it. That's a good one. April says, I use black velvet behind the image when I frame an image on glass. Beautiful. That's kind of the original way to do it. And black velvet has this great quality. You know it. You've seen it. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Hank says, it ruins the image. What? That's impossible. I don't know. I'd have to see that, Hank. Hank, no, I'm kidding you. We know it ruins the image. It doesn't matter how many times I go on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube and say, don't use modern spray paint on your glass. Don't do it. I mean, it may last for a day or two or a month or two or whatever, but or it may dissolve the image right away, Even on the backside, it'll peel off and stuff too. So yeah, don't do that. It does ruin the image. So let me go. You know what? I was going to. Here's the thing. If you have, let me look at this. I didn't even pull this up. I was going to give you a recommended reading and recommended watching. I don't have my regular format right here, right now, but I wanted to talk just a tiny bit about Richard Avedon. And do you guys know who Richard Avedon is? And do you like him? That's the question. You like him or no? You like him? Yeah. Okay. Some people, yeah. I get it. The reason I like Richard Avedon, two reasons. One of the reasons is that he had some great insight into what we call the ontological question, the question of being, right? Which translates in ultimately to death denial and death anxiety. He suffered from that tremendously. I don't know if you've seen, and hold on just a second, I'll pull this up. I don't know if you've seen his images of his father dying. Probably some of the best. Let me just pull this up. I'll show you a couple. Maybe I can change your mind a little bit. I thought this was really powerful. Images of his father dying. He was in the hospital. He had a whole series of them. There's one of them too. This may be after his death. I'm not sure. Yeah, it is. If you haven't looked at, and I'm not talking about fashion. I'm not into fashion. Well, you can tell I'm into fashion, right? I'm not into fashion photography or anything. So I don't really care for his Parisian stuff. His stuff in the late 40s and 50s. I care about when he came into later life. Oh, well, look at that. The shirt I'm wearing, the American West portraits. I stole it from Richard Avedon. That's how I did a whole project. And his American West portraits are really, really profound. If you read about his here's one from his. I want to show you one from his American West portraits. I do like that one a lot. Yeah. In the American West, if you haven't looked at these were shot. A lot of these are 8x10 film pieces. These were made. A lot of them were made right around the area that I live and have lived in the American West here. Look at his work. I guess my recommended reading and watching this week is after the Death Denial and going through the whole series with Becker, Richard Avedon, Sally Mann, a lot of these folks that we talk about have dealt directly through photographs with these ideas. And obviously, mostly they're humans, but Richard Avedon said these wonderful things like, in the end, we're all skulls, kind of thing. Just some really profound. If you haven't looked at Richard Avedon, look at his work, specifically in the American West and the photographs of his father dying. And if you kind of wishy-washy on him, look at these two bodies of work if you haven't looked at them. I think they might change your mind a little bit on his work. I think there's and especially if you've gone through this Death Denial series with us, Richard Avedon, his father's death, and In the American West portraits are two great projects to look at if you're into that thing. So anyway, what else do we have? That's all I had for you guys today. Was it did you like it? I hope you got something out of it. I think you'd get a little piece of it here and there. If you have questions, email them to me. I'll come back next week, I hope. We have summertime breaking here, man. We're high up in I think we're 21 degrees today, or 21 degrees or 23 degrees in a few days. So, however, we're still getting down to 3 or 4 degrees at night, still in the mountains here. So warm and cool. But in June we'll have everything squared up. I showed you this just as an example, but those are my buildings here. These are my plans for my building. Is sitting outside right now. These are my plans for it. I'm working on getting my final inspection, my 20 by 30 building, my studio, 15 feet high, 12 feet high. My studio is going to be built in the next month, hopefully, and I'll be back to going on. I don't know how COVID's going to do. I've had a lot of workshop inquiries, and I'm a little ambivalent right now because I've only had one shot. One injection. And I'm not going back for another one anytime soon. So this is going to play in a factor of what I do. Just for you guys have asked me this via email. That's why I'm mentioning this. I don't know when I'm going to do workshops again, but it's going to be good when I do it because you'll be able to come up here. You can make a knife, pound out a knife, go down to the range and throw it a few times at the target. Come up and pour a plate. Go make a print. Go hike in the mountains up in the backyard. Go see the bears and the mountain lions. So it'll be good stuff when it happens. I just don't know when it'll happen. So hang in there with me a little bit longer. I know some of you inquired about it. I've gotten emails and I've tried to explain. I'm just not quite there yet. Dan, we're still working on a greenhouse. Do you believe that? I'm frustrated. We'll get it up though. We'll get everything going. I got to get all my permits and everything, but the minute we're ready to go, I will definitely announce it on this show for those of you that are interested. So, Stand up for Judas. I don't know who you are, but that's pretty cool. Speaking of death denial, have you ever tried making collodion with equal iodides and bromides? Does this still produce good contrast in midtones, or does it? Man, you're asking some really good questions. Stand up for Judas. Here's what happens. When you look at recipes, you're always going to see the proportions a little bit bigger in the iodides, right? I mean, that's just generally speaking, right? So what he's asking, what if you put, rather than 1.5 grams, you put 3 grams of ammonium iodide and 3 grams of cadmium bromide, or iodide and bromide, right? Here's the only thing that's going to do, Judas. You'll still be able to make images, and that'd be fine for the most part. But the real kicker here, you're going to suck up a lot of your silver out of the bath. Those salts, or you're going to double decompose all. Remember what happens in this process. Those salts are going to convert, and you got 2 byproducts from, right? The iodides are going to convert to silver iodide. The bromides are going to convert to silver bromide. Then you have the nitrate, ammonium or potassium, and you got cadmium nitrate, the 2 byproducts of the double decomposition process. Those are all going to go. And the quantity is very important, for the simple fact is you don't want to reduce that much. You're going to lay the silver down. You're going to eat your silver bath up. So the more people have asked me, can I increase my salt? I'm going to put more salt in there. All you're going to do, your bath is going to deplete quickly, very fast. That's what happens if you add too many salts, or too much. How do you say that? Too many salts, too much salt, however you want to put it. Yes, you'll eat up your silver bath fast. Well, thank you, Will. I'm glad. Yes, I'm glad to share it. I'm glad to share it. Absolutely. Even though you only had 1 shot, you have better protect. Yes, I agree, Linda. That's what we're kind of, man, ladies and gentlemen, this took me a month to get over this stuff. I swear to God. I can't, I don't have that time to deal with that in my life right now. And I wear a mask. I do all that stuff anyway. And I'm up in the mountains. So you're right, Linda. Technically, I'm with Jeffrey. Jeffrey and I have had 1 shot. We should both be around 80%, but we still, need to do our thing. So I'm going to get my antibodies checked in July. So if anybody comes up here when we do have workshops, we'll have COVID tests. We'll be, all that stuff. I mean, it's just not the right time to do this right now. I know a lot of people. I was going to mention this. Somebody asked me to mention this, and I didn't think I wanted to, but I guess I will now. Somebody mentioned about all these collodion festivals that are trying to start up and people getting together and doing stuff. I get it, man. 15, 16 months of being isolated or not being around people and all that stuff. You want to get out. You'd be surprised in my life. I don't have that much interaction with people. I've made it a kind of a point moving up to the mountains alone to be able to do that. When I do interact with people, I'm very kind and very nice. But when I don't want to interact with people, I don't want to have people around. So I'm to the point where when I have somebody here, it will be authentic and valid, and we'll enjoy it, and it'll be safe. But in the meantime, I'm just kind of hanging back. We've got plenty of stuff to do here, and we're just kind of biding our time. But I agree with you, Linda. I'm at least better off than not having anything, and I hope they'll come out in the future and say, oh, we're so sorry, you people with vestibular ear problems and tinnitus, and oh, we're so sorry that hit you. Like, we know that now, and we apologize that you were down for 6 weeks and you couldn't walk. We're sorry, but we had to get everybody vaccinated. I get it. You can forget about me for a minute. I'm good. Yeah, you could say that. I mean, not a curmudgeon. Let's say a lover of privacy. A lover of privacy. I am so into privacy. You know what? Jeannie and I go out and have coffee out here every morning. We sit out just in our chairs out here in the path here, and we sit there in the sun, and nobody looks at us. We're not in a fishbowl. Nobody. The deer come by, and look at us, but no human beings. We really revel in that. So yeah, maybe I am a curmudgeon. All right, ladies and gentlemen, enough of rambling. I so appreciate your time. I honestly do. And if you haven't got my book and you want it, it's on Amazon. It's called Chemical Pictures. It's the one with the rabbit skull and the gall nut on it. Not Aaron. That's the older book. But People ask me about that too, but if you want it, it's on Amazon. If you not, that's fine. Come on back next week. We'll have something cooking. Send me your emails. If anybody wants to show some work or talk about something specific, let me know. I'm happy to oblige. Oh, thank you, Daniel. I just purchased your book. I'm glad you did. I appreciate that. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jeffrey and Pablo and Boguslav. Appreciate your time. I say this every week, but I'm serious. I appreciate you guys coming in here and hanging with me. You don't have to do this. Nobody does. So I'm greatly appreciative. And we have this little great thing going on. We'll keep it going as long as we can and try to share. See you next week. Come on back. Stay healthy and safe and happy, and we'll see you next week. Ciao. Bye-bye.